Transition, the process of change from one condition to another.
We are now at a new crossroad where change is evident once again.
What does not serve us must transform us anew.
Returning to our original state of oneness and true nature of that which created who we truly are.
Confusion was the way of the past. Enlightenment is the way of the now and future, shedding away the layers of deceit.
We now bring you the transformation of the two who started as one. Our fearless planet never stands still.
Earth has been in a process of transition, and we are not exempt from this remarkable ongoing reality.
Welcome to Transition Radio.
Well, good evening, everyone. Welcome to Transition Radio Show. I am Mark.
And I'm Lena, and we wanted to thank you for joining us tonight. We know you have a lot of other things that you could be doing right now, but we do appreciate you chiming in here for a little bit.
Whether you're watching us live or later on, it's a crazy world. Keeps turning round and round, and
we're like,
it's every time
I don't know,
something goes on with the Republicans, they always, transgender for everyone. And
the president writes that down in his text messages all the time. You know, his Truth Social posts are always transgender for everybody, because he knows those are catchphrases that trigger people.
To make people forget about the real problems. It's like, so you've got a few cases of individuals who may or may not be trans. They might identify as trans, but they're dealing with other issues. Obviously, the latest thing was hoopla about supposing a trans woman who had like massive tattoos, neo-Nazi tattoos, and was a conservative right-winger, and
moved to Florida, actually.
Yeah,
voted for Trump.
Yeah, and it seems like everybody who does shootings are right-wingers.
It seems like it. They're the ones with the guns all the time.
Yeah.
I had heard something else that happened over in British Columbia, up in Canada, about 6 days ago, and I was like, oh, is this going to be starting again here? Are we going to have another shooting?
Yeah.
And sure enough,
here we go.
Oh, and wait for it, April 1st, you'll find something else show up.
Oh,
probably.
definitely, because it's it's what happens, and. Yeah, it's just crazy, but a lot of it has to be blamed on this Christian nationalism, okay? And it's because they've been pushing the, anti-woke agenda, anti-trans agenda, anti-LGBT.
Anti-immigrant agenda,
anything that's not
non-white agenda.
Yeah.
It's a very biased group of people that have been working to turn this country into what it's becoming for the last, I don't know, ever since I was placed on this planet.
Yeah, and you're not going to win. You're not going to win because you're based with lies. You're, racist, angry people that really, you won't win. That's all I have to say. But anyway, we're going to start off the show with a vignette, right?
Yes.
So here we go. Vignette number 1.
The politics of God.
Yes.
For generations, the engine has been running. Steel and signal, policy and profit, momentum layered on momentum. It does not roar, it hums. It does not demand devotion, it manufactures necessity. We inherited its rhythm. We learned its language. We mistook its scale for permanence. And slowly, what surrounded us began to define us. The pace, the pressure, the quiet fear of falling behind. But permanence is an illusion. No structure is sacred. No architecture is eternal. No system is total. The moment we see it clearly, it changes. The moment participation becomes intentional, momentum shifts. Resilience is not rebellion. It is capacity. It is skill learned, debt reduced, hands re-engaged, relationships strengthened. It is the widening of options, and when options expand, control contracts. Power depends on inevitability, on the belief that there is no outside, no alternative, no beyond. Remove inevitability, and power becomes conditional. The engine will continue, cities will glow, markets will move, institutions will endure, but they will no longer define the horizon. Because we are larger than the structures we inherit, larger than the systems we participate in, larger than the architecture that surrounds us. Hope is not collapse. Hope is evolution. And evolution begins when we outgrow what once contained us. You were not meant to live alone.
Definitely. And we are outgrowing the false narrative that have been placed here on this planet and enslaved the human race for a very long time. And our eyes are wide open. May 4th, 1493, Rome. Pope Alexander VI issues a document called Inter Caetera. It is a papal bull and edict carrying the full authority of the Catholic Church, and it divides the non-Christian world.
Divides the world.
Yeah.
Just like that.
Yeah.
Just like that. A pope says, I decree a papal bull, an edict is made, and things just boom. No one ever accused the papacy of lacking ambition, right?
Well, precisely, the document grants to the Catholic monarchs of Spain and their successors all lands discovered and to be discovered towards the west and south. Lands not previously possessed by any Christian ruler. These territories, the Pope declares, are given for a sacred purpose to bring their inhabitants to embrace the Catholic faith.
And to what? For what they already believe in. Just like forget that exists.
I guess so.
I mean, they had their own belief systems that predated any of theirs by tens of thousands
of years,
if not hundreds of thousands of years.
They're the new kids on the block. They're the reset babies. They're the ones that it's like a newfound bacteria.
So if you weren't on their team, your home wasn't your home. It was just a potential asset waiting to be claimed. That's the fine print.
And that's how it's always been with these colonizers that are pushing their belief system. And the belief system, then they take things, you know. That's the headline. The logic is simple. Christian Europeans are chosen by God. They represent civilization, salvation, divine order. Non-Christians, regardless of how long they have occupied their land, regardless of what societies they have built, possess no true sovereignty. Their land belongs by divine right to Christendom. Conquest is not theft. It is a holy mandate. Yeah, sure.
That is very convenient.
No, totally.
I mean, that's a very convenient idea. This idea, this theological claim, becomes known as the doctrine of discovery. And believe it or not, it's still being used to this day by our American court system. It hasn't somehow not existed anymore. And it is not a relic. It is not ancient history with no bearing on the present. It is the seed from which American Christian nationalism grows.
And it seems not just on this corner of the world, but Gaza. I mean, it's the same thing. What they're trying to do to Cuba, same thing, right? Within a generation, Spain and Portugal used the doctrine of discovery to justify the enslavement and slaughter of millions of indigenous people across the Americas. Other European powers, Protestant England included, adopt the same logic. If Catholics can claim divine right to conquer, so can Protestants.
In the 15th century, a Portuguese chronicler named Gomes Yanes de Zurara writes what may be the first systematic articulation of European racial supremacy. In his Chronicle of the Discovery and Conquest of Guinea, he describes Africans as savages in need of Christian civilization. Does this not sound familiar?
It's what they do.
He argues that enslaving them is an act of mercy, a pathway to salvation. This is not just conquest, it is missionary work.
And that's how they've spread their poison throughout the world. Augustus Corbett, a Black attorney and scholar, has traced his history in detail. He says the doctrine of discovery established the false notion that God created Europeans as inherently superior and ordained them to spread Christianity through conquest. And this notion, he says, has been used to justify slavery, colonialism, lynching, and genocide for more than 500 years.
In 1512, another papal bull is issued. This one is called Sublimus Dei. It declares that indigenous people in the Americas, people that are from this part of the country, are fully human and should not be enslaved. But the declaration is largely ignored. The economic and political machinery of colonization is already in motion, and theology bends to serve it.
By the time English Puritans arrived in New England in 1620, the doctrine of discovery is embedded in their worldview. They believe they are God's chosen people, a new Israel crossing into a new promised land. And like the ancient Israelites, they believe God has given them this land and commanded them to subdue it. How convenient.
In 1630, John Winthrop, governor of Massachusetts Bay Colony, delivers a sermon aboard the ship Arbella. He tells his fellow Puritans that they will be as a, quote, city upon a hill, with the eyes of all people upon them. This is not merely inspirational rhetoric. It is a claim of divine election. America, even before it is America, of course, the America that Americans know as America, which isn't all of America, but just a little part that they call it, is imagined as a covenant nation with a sacred mission.
The Puritans build a theocratic society. Church and state are fused. Dissent is heresy. Quakers are expelled or hanged. Roger Williams is banished for arguing that civil government has no authority over matters of conscience. Anne Hutchinson is tried and exiled from teaching Bible study in her home. The Puritan vision is not pluralism, it is purity. And purity requires control.
The Puritans also enslaved indigenous people and Africans. Slavery is legal in Massachusetts from 1641, and it is justified theologically. The Reverend Cotton Mather, one of the most prominent Puritan ministers, writes a pamphlet in 1706 titled The Negro Christianized. In it, he writes, "By the providence of God, poor Negroes are cast under your government and protection. You take them as your possessions."
How messed up is that? Mather argues that enslavement is an opportunity for evangelism. Slaveholders, he says, have a duty to Christianize their slaves. But he also makes clear that conversion does not lead to freedom. Of course not. A baptized slave is still property. Christianity, in Mather's formulation, sanctifies that hierarchy. It does not disrupt it.
Mather is not an outlier. His father, Richard Mather, and his grandfather, John Cotton, are also prominent ministers who support slavery. George Whitefield, the famous evangelist of the Great Awakening in the 1730s and 40s, which I had the privilege of learning about in Bible college, owned slaves. Of course, they never told us that part.
No.
Jonathan Edwards, a theologian and preacher whose sermons ignited religious fervor across the colonies as the Second Great Awakening or something, owned slaves. I wasn't taught that either. I learned about Jonathan Edwards. Slavery and Christianity are not in tension in colonial America. They are hooked. They are partners.
Yeah, by that time of the American Revolution, the colonies have developed what historian Catherine Breckis calls Christian republicanism. It is a fusion of Puritan covenant theology, Enlightenment political theory, and radical Whig ideology. The result is a belief that American independence is divinely ordained that the new nation has a sacred mission, and that is its identity is inseparable from Protestant Christianity, of course. And we have vignette number 2.
May 4, 1493, Rome. A papal decree known as Inter Caetera is issued at the center of European power. Its logic is simple and devastating. Lands inhabited by non-Christians can be claimed by Christian rulers in the name of salvation, civilization, and divine authority. That idea becomes known as the doctrine of discovery, and it doesn't remain an old theological argument tucked away in the past. It travels. It becomes a moral permission slip for conquest, an architecture of justification that tells empires they are not taking land, but redeeming it. It reframes domination as destiny. It recasts invasion as mission. And once a people believe they have divine authorization, every boundary becomes negotiable. The people already living there become obstacles. Their sovereignty becomes invisible. Their humanity becomes secondary to the supposed sacred purpose of expansion. This is one of the earliest templates for what we now recognize as Christian nationalism, the fusion of religious certainty with state power, where political control is treated as holy and violence can be baptized as virtue. If we want to understand where these ideas come from, we have to start here. At the moment, faith language becomes a tool of empire, and the cost is written into the world.
The revolution is preached from pulpits as a holy cause. Ministers tell congregations that King George is a tyrant like Pharaoh, that Americans are God's chosen people like the Israelites, and that resistance to tyranny is obedience to God. The founding documents do not establish a theocracy, but the culture is steeped in the belief that America is indeed a Christian nation.
And yet the Constitution, when it is written, does not mention God. It does not establish Christianity. It explicitly prohibits religious tests for office. This is not an accident. James Madison and Thomas Jefferson, among others, understand that religious establishment leads to tyranny. They have seen it in Europe. They have seen it in Puritan colonies, and they design a system intended to prevent it.
They literally saw that these religious extremist beliefs, even if someone else doesn't believe in them, that they literally lead to tyranny. And this is what we're having right now. We're having a tyrannical development in this country where the Christian right has made bedfellows with a 36-time convicted felon. And have literally put all their eggs in that basket just because he promises them, a reversal of Roe v. Wade or fight against the trans people.
Yeah, it seems like they've been running away, for the longest time, trying to push their views, and they get kicked out or something of that nature, and they end up like trying to recreate the same thing that they got kicked out for. But
the cultural belief in a Christian America persists, even today. And it is weaponized to redefine who belongs. In the early 1800s, Protestant Americans viewed Catholics as a threat. I know my parents viewed Catholics as a threat. They said, oh, no, that John F. Kennedy, oh, no, he was a Catholic. We liked him, but he was a Catholic. Catholic immigrants from Ireland and later from Italy and Poland are seen as loyal to a foreign pope, as incompatible with American democracy. Mobs burn Catholic churches. The Know Nothing Party rises. Again, the Know Nothing Party. That sounds like the Trump administration. In the 1850s, with the explicit goal of excluding Catholics from political power.
It's just like a bunch of gangs fighting each other. I mean, there's supposedly one God, and I know there are many, many gods that have been worshipped throughout history. Why we all of a sudden decided that the God of the Bible was it, I don't know. But it's always been that warring between different faith, and my God's better than your God. And it's like, is there even a God at all? The same exclusionary logic applies to Mormons, to Jews, to freethinkers, to anyone who does not fit the Protestant Christian mold. To be truly American, the culture insists is to be a certain kind of Christian, This is not yet called Christian nationalism, but it is the same ideology.
And nowhere is this more obvious. Nowhere is the fusion of Christianity and white supremacy more explicit than in the theological defense of slavery. By the 1830s, as the abolitionist movement grows, Southern preachers develop elaborate scriptural arguments to justify human bondage.
Totally. They cite the curse of Ham in Genesis, claiming it justifies black servitude. They cite Paul's letters instructing slaves, how conveniently, to obey their masters. They argue that slavery is part of God's natural order, that it is a positive good, that it civilizes and Christianizes Africans who would otherwise be lost in paganism. This is not French theology. This is preached from most prominent pulpits in the South.
The Southern Baptist Convention, which I have very, very much familiarity with, splits from the Northern Baptists in 1845, explicitly over the question of whether slaveholders can serve as missionaries. The South says yes, the North says no. The denomination fractures. Methodists and Presbyterians split along the same lines. Slavery divides American Christianity, and the Southern churches choose slavery.
Frederick Douglass, who escaped slavery and becomes one of the most powerful abolitionists, writes about this in his autobiography. He describes his master, Thomas Auld, becoming more cruel after a religious conversion. Douglass writes, I have seen him tie up a lame young woman and whip her with a heavy cowskin upon her naked shoulders, causing the warm red blood to drip. And in justification of the bloody deed, he would quote this passage of scripture. He that knoweth his master's will and doeth it not shall be beaten with many stripes.
Talk about cherry picking scripture.
I know, right?
Douglass concludes that slaveholding religion is the worst form of religion because it gives divine sanction to cruelty. And I might add, immigrant persecuting Christianity, religion is the worst form of religion.
Yeah.
Because it gives divine sanction to cruelty.
Totally.
It allows men to commit atrocities and call them holy. And it teaches the enslaved that their suffering is ordained by God.
Even what has been going on with the Epstein list and what happened in that island and many islands and many of the groups, they use that form of ritual sacrifices and torture and trafficking and all that under the name of the God.
Yeah.
You know, and people don't realize that it's the same God of the Bible. You know, they don't understand that it's the same individual, because you read the Bible and you're going to see quotes that are very similar.
Epstein was a Jew. So
yeah. After the Civil War, this theology does not disappear. It morphs. It becomes the lost cause, a mythology that the South fought for states' rights, that slavery was benign, that Reconstruction was Northern tyranny, and that segregation is the restoration of natural and divine order.
White churches across the South preach this. They teach that racial hierarchy is biblical. They teach that the Confederacy was a noble cause. They teach that integration is a violation of God's design. And they build monuments, not just in town squares, but in their sanctuaries. Jesus and the Confederacy are intertwined.
In the early 1900s, lynching becomes a tool of racial terror. Between 1877 and the 1950s, more than 4,000 Black Americans are lynched. Many of these lynchings happen on Sundays after church. Some are attended by thousands of white spectators, including children. Photographs are taken, postcards are made, and white churches say nothing, or worse, they justify it. And you know, the Super Bowl, they were having fits about women gyrating or, you know, Bad Bunny, whatever, doing what he was doing. But they allowed children to watch lynchings and I'm sure hangings and I'm sure burning of the witches, right? In the 1920s, the Klan experienced a massive resurgence, not just in the South, but across the country. Millions of members. They march openly in Washington, and they define themselves explicitly as defenders of white Protestant Christian American against Catholics, Jews, immigrants, and Black Americans. This is Christian nationalism by another name.
In 1924, Congress passes the Immigration Act. We talked about it in a prior show, also called the Johnson-Reed Act. It establishes strict quotas designed to preserve the racial and ethnic composition of the United States. The goal is to maintain white Protestant dominance. The law remains in effect until 1965.
Throughout the 20th century, white Christian nationalism adapts to each new threat. In the 1930s and 1940s, it emerges with an anti-communism and isolationism in the 1950s. It opposes the civil rights movement. White pastors preach that integration violates biblical separation. They argue that Martin Luther King Jr. is a communist agitator. Everyone's a communist agitator to them. They say desegregation is an attack on religious freedom. What are these people smoking?
In 1958, Jerry Falwell Sr., a young Baptist preacher in, get this, Lynchburg, Virginia. I wonder why they chose to call it Lynchburg. Maybe it's because they have a bunch of lynchings there.
Yeah.
Preaches a sermon called Ministers and Marchers. He attacks MLK Jr. and other civil rights leaders. He says ministers have no business in politics. And then he says this: if Chief Justice Warren had known God's word and desired to do the Lord's will, the 1954 decision, referring to Brown versus Board of Education, the civil rights, would never have been made. The facilities should be separate. When God has drawn a line of distinction, we should not attempt to cross that line.
Basically, it's just a racist institution that uses their God to justify all the stuff that they do.
It's embarrassing.
It is totally embarrassing.
If you look at if you're a Christian nationalist and you look at your background and your early beginnings and your foundation, you will see the ugliness and the disgustingness that is behind it all.
What I don't understand is the people of color, the Hispanics, and everyone else that follows this white man's religion and think that they're part of the club.
Oh yeah, they're going to kick you out.
Yeah,
They'll use you.
Yeah, big time. And their God doesn't see you. You know. 9 years later, in 1967, Falwell founds Lynchburg Christian Academy. It is a segregation academy created explicitly to avoid federal desegregation orders. It's all white. Shocker. And it justified as religious liberty. And I'm sure there are a lot of groups nowadays that do the same thing. This is the seed of modern Christian right. We've seen documentaries of all the people that just want all white people.
Yeah, even now.
Yeah, and they're sitting in their churches, and yeah, crazy.
Desegregation became a calling card for these people.
Yeah.
In 1971, the Internal Revenue Service revokes the tax-exempt status of private schools that practice racial discrimination. Bob Jones University, a fundamentalist Christian school in South Carolina, loses its exemption because it bans interracial dating. The school fights the IRS all the way to the Supreme Court, all the way until 1983, when the court ruled against them.
See, that's what they want to make America great again. That's what it means, make America white again.
Segregated again.
Yeah, segregated. And the fact is that America has never been white.
And it won't be, because the numbers just don't work in the favor of the Caucasian race. I mean, there's less. The genes aren't that great.
I've said it time and time again. They're the product of the reset. Product of the reset. Product of incubator babies.
Yeah.
This battle, not abortion, is what mobilizes white evangelicals into a political force. Paul Weyrich, a conservative strategist who co-founded the Heritage Foundation, later admitted this explicitly. He said, what caused the movement to surface was the federal government move against Christian schools.
Abortion becomes the public face of the movement because it is more politically palatable, just like trans rights, right?
Yeah.
Anti-trans legislation.
Yep.
than defending segregation. But the engine, the animating force, is a defense of white Christian social order. That is the through line from 1493 with the Spaniards all the way to 1983. From the doctrine of discovery to Bob Jones University, from Cotton Mather to Jerry Falwell.
Christian nationalism is not incidentally racist. Racism is in its DNA. The ideology was created to justify conquest and slavery. It was refined to justify segregation, and it has been adapted again and again to resist every movement towards equality and pluralism. I'm sure we had a few episodes ago, we talked about that everything from what they called an illegal alien all stemmed from that racial divide, from trying to keep America from having any other peoples but the white people. But it won't work because there are not that many of you. And there are
the numbers just don't bode well.
No. So when we see a cross carried up the steps of the United States Capitol on January 6, 2021, we're not seeing something new. When we see Confederate battle flags, signs depicting Jesus in a red MAGA hat, banners declaring Jesus is my savior and Trump is my president, we're seeing the latest expression of an ideology that has been with us since before the United States existed.
The night before, on January 5th, groups of Christians gathered in Washington for what they called Jericho marches. The symbolism was deliberate. In the book of Joshua, the Israelites marched around the walls of Jericho 7 times, and on the 7th day, the walls fell, and they took the city by force. These marchers believed they were doing the same thing. They were praying for the walls of government to fall. They were claiming America for God.
It's just, I can't understand how people, when they're small-minded, could actually believe that a creator would think that one individual group of people is better than another group of people. That's just small-minded mentality. But the question remains, how did this 500-year-old ideology become the political juggernaut we see today? How did it move from margins to the mainstream? From theology to legislation, from church pews to Capitol steps. We talked about it before. They propaganda, the radios they gave the islanders or the people to like promote, brainwash people, because that's all they have is brainwashing.
Well, the answer is the architects.
Yep.
The moral majority was not the ideological origin of Christian nationalism. It was the political vehicle. To understand the ideology, we need to go back to the 1960s and a man named John Rushdoony.
Wow.
Boy, that name, he must have gotten literally ridiculed.
John Rushdoony. Well, Rushdoony was a Calvinist theologian and the founder of a movement called Christian Reconstructionism. Hey, they come up with all these different, In 1973, he published a book called The Institute of Biblical Law. It is over 800 pages long.
Longer than the New Testament.
Yeah, and its central argument is this. Old Testament law, including the civil and judicial laws given to ancient Israel, should be the law of modern nations. These includes the death penalty for adultery, homosexuality, blasphemy, witchcraft, and striking or cursing one's parents.
Rushdoony called this theonomy, which means God's law. He believed that secular government was rebellion against God. He believed that democracy was heresy. He wrote, "The heresy of democracy has since the beginning been the desire of the people to be their own God." He argued that only Christians should hold political power and that the purpose of government was to enforce biblical law.
Yet no one has heard God yet. They all say, "Oh, God told me," but it should be audible. We should all, if a God was all knowing, all loving, why would he not appear in front of everyone for all of us to see? What's the mystery? Rushdoony was also a young earth creationist who rejected evolution and a defender of racial segregation. He argued that the integration violated biblical principles of separation. He wrote that interracial marriage was not sinful, but was unwise because it violated natural boundaries, and what would he know about natural boundaries?
Christian Reconstructionism never became a mass movement, but its ideas permeated the Christian right. Rushdoony influenced homeschooling curricula, including Abeka and Bob Jones University Press materials, which taught millions of children that America was founded as a Christian nation, that slavery was not really that bad, that the Civil War was about state rights, and that capitalism is divinely ordained.
Oh, of course it is.
And now we move to vignette
Number
3.
three.
In early colonial America, many settlers carried a powerful story with them, that they were building a covenant society, something like a new Israel in a promised land. For some, that wasn't just private belief. It shaped public identity. It suggested that a community could be chosen, blessed, set apart, and therefore entitled to authority. And that is where a dangerous temptation begins. The temptation to confuse moral certainty with political permission. When a nation sees itself as sacred, dissent can start to look like rebellion. Difference can start to look like threat, and power can start to feel like a divine right. But even at the founding, America carried a tension that never fully went away. A religious population living under a constitutional framework designed to prevent a state church. The question was never whether people could believe. The question was whether the state could enforce belief, whether citizenship would depend on theology, whether laws would serve everyone, or only the right kind of believer. Christian nationalism grows in the space where that line blurs, where faith becomes a shortcut past pluralism, rights, and democratic debate. Because once politics becomes holy, compromise becomes betrayal. And once compromise becomes betrayal, democracy becomes fragile.
It's crazy stuff, but they're smart because they know that if they instill the fear of God as they have throughout history, and that's how they colonized and took over everything by instilling that fear to the indigenous people of the world. But it's like what they don't realize that they're missing substance. They're missing tangible things. You could create all these lies, and people have fallen for it, obviously, but it's not going to work because when is Jesus coming? We've been waiting and waiting and waiting, and he ain't coming. Anyway, guys, we're going to go into our musical segment here. And the next song the song that we're going to play for tonight, one of them is Corazón del Mundo, Heart of the World.
Across the world, our spirits roll. Latino, Taino, indigenous, we call this earth our home. But tales are twisted, histories denied. Our voices silenced, our truths cast aside. Corazón del mundo, beating strong and true. A tapestry of colors, me and you. Let's rise together, break the chains they bind, united as one for all humankind. America's a canvas painted with many hues, a symphony of tongues, the vibrant mix of views. But division echoes a manufactured divide, stemming from the hate they cannot hide. Corazón del mundo, beating strong and true, that tapestry of colors. Me and you, let's rise together, break the chains they bind, united as one for all humankind. tapestry of colors, me and you, let's rise together, break the chains they bind, united as one for all humankind. People of color, rising, claim your crown. People of every race, stand your ground. Shed the false narrative, the lies they weave. In our shared story we must all believe. Corazón del mundo, beating strong and true. A tapestry of colors, me and you, let's rise together, break the chains they bind, united as one for all humankind. We are the truth, the heartbeat of this world, the force of nature, our story to be unfurled. With every voice raised, with every hand in hand, we'll build a future where all can understand. Corazón del mundo, beating strong and true, a tapestry of colors, me and you, let's rise together, break the chains they bind, united as one for all humankind.
So that song was inspired by the Super Bowl halftime
Oh, yeah.
I decided to write, because it's like what he said was very true. America is made up of many, many countries.
is.
It's not just the United States, and the indigenous people are the
Bunch of
heart
places.
of this world.
Mhm.
If we would be run by the indigenous people versus the colonists, we would be
a different world.
what a different world we would be living in. Anyway, guys, if you haven't subscribed yet, please subscribe to the channel. There's many ways of supporting us. You could either become a Patreon, or you could do a reoccurring, a one-time PayPal if you're able to. If not, just make sure you subscribe, hit that notification button, and share the videos if you enjoy watching. Now, Christine Saluk, who was homeschooled with Abeka curriculum, describes it as propaganda. She says the textbooks taught that Native Americans were spiritually deficient, that living in harmony with nature was primitive, that the South wanted gradual abolition, and that scientists were agents of a devil trying to deceive believers. There's always a devil under every rock, according to Christians. She was taught that subduing the earth from Genesis meant conquering it through capitalism. Do you see the mentality of these people? It's crazy.
Another architect of Christian nationalism was Francis Schaeffer, a Presbyterian minister who founded a Christian commune in Switzerland called Les Abris. Schaeffer was more intellectually respectable than Rushdoony. He wrote books on art, philosophy, and culture. He became known as the intellectual godfather of the Christian right.
In 1979, Schaeffer produced a film series with his son called Whatever Happened to the Human Race. It focused on abortion and euthanasia. The film depicted abortion as a Holocaust and argued that the secular humanism had led Western civilization into moral chaos. Yet they don't feed the babies. They don't take care of the babies that are here, like what happened to that, I don't know if they're Mexican or they're being deported, a 2-month-old baby who got so sick by being detained, some sort of pneumonia. Schaeffer toured the country showing the film to evangelical audiences. He convinced a generation of Christians that they were at war with secularism and that the political engagement was a moral duty.
Schaeffer also promoted a revisionist history of America. He argued that the founders were Christians who intended to build a Christian nation, and that the separation of church and state was a modern invention designed to push Christianity out of public life. This narrative, though historically false, became gospel among evangelicals.
The historian Catherine Breckes of Harvard University has pointed out that the U.S. Constitution is a godless document, and that's why they're trying to get rid of it now. It does not mention God. It does not establish Christianity, and the founders explicitly rejected attempts to insert religious language. In the 19th century, Christian activists repeatedly petitioned Congress to amend the Constitution to acknowledge God. Every time Congress refused. James Madison warned that doing so would open the door to religious oppression, which is what we're seeing now ever since Trumpy is in the White House.
But Schaeffer's narrative was more emotionally compelling than history. He told evangelicals that America had been stolen from them, that secular elites were destroying a Christian heritage, and that the only way to save the nation was to take it back.
Schaeffer's son, Frank Schaeffer, later renounced his father's legacy. In his memoir, Crazy for God, he wrote that he and his father had helped create a monster. He described how they toured the country with Republican operatives, using abortion as a wedge issue to build a political movement. He said, "We were iterating a vision of a Christian America where our vision of faith would rule."
A third architect is less well known, but perhaps more influential today. His name is Abraham Kuyper, a Dutch Reformed theologian and politician from the late 1800s. Kuyper developed a concept called sphere sovereignty, which argued that different spheres of life, family, church, state, business, education, should operate under God's authority, but independently of one another.
This sounds benign, but in the hands of Christian nationalists, it became a blueprint for dominion. Kuyper is often quoted as saying, "There is not a square inch in the whole domain of our human existence over which Christ, who is sovereign over all, does not cry, 'Mine.'" Christian nationalists took this to mean that every institution in society must be brought under Christian control.
That sounds like a
so.
God with a temper tantrum.
Oh, yeah,
Little baby.
mine.
That's like Trump, too.
Yeah,
Mine.
yeah, mine.
This idea became the foundation for what is now called the Seven Mountains Mandate, a teaching popularized in the 2000s by Lance Wallnau, a Christian nationalist speaker and author. The Seven Mountains are religion, family, education, government, media, arts and entertainment, and business. The mandate is simple. Christians must take dominion over all seven mountains in order to transform society and prepare the way for Christ's return.
Matthew Taylor, a scholar who has spent years studying Christian nationalism, describes this as post-millennialism. Unlike pre-millennialists who believe Christians will be raptured before a period of tribulation, post-millennialists believe Christians must successfully disciple the nation and establish 1,000 years of peace before Christ returns. This theology produces a very different politics. It's not about escape. It's about conquest. And isn't that what they've been known for? Conquest, taking over.
Doug Wilson, a Reformed Presbyterian pastor and one of the most articulate defenders of Christian nationalism today, explained this in an interview with Sam Harris. Wilson said that he believes in the cultural mandate from Genesis, the command to fill the earth and subdue it. He interprets this through the Great Commission in Matthew, the command to make disciples of all nations. Together, Wilson argues these passages mean Christians are commanded to Christianize every nation on earth.
Wilson also embraces theonomy. He believes Old Testament law applies unless the New Testament explicitly overturns it. He's a young earth creationist who rejects evolution, and he believes secularism is a failed project. When asked if he supports religious tests for public office, Wilson said he would accept them in what he called a Presbyterian utopia 500 years from now. But he insists that his current work is simply about persuading people, not coercing them.
Of course, he would like to coerce.
Yeah, of course he would.
This is the incrementalist strategy of Christian nationalism. Publicly, leaders like Wilson claim they're only exercising free speech, only participating in democracy. Privately, they speak openly about long-term goals, Project 2025. In a recent documentary by Tobiah Powell released in January 2026, several Christian nationalist pastors were interviewed. Dale Partridge said, "I don't want freedom of religion because I don't think Jesus wants freedom of religion. It is a violation of the first commandment to worship other gods. He said there should be no mosques in America.
Another pastor, Joel Webbon, said Christians don't need to convert a majority. They only need the will to power. He pointed to the LGBT movement as a model, a small minority that captured institutions and changed society. Webbon said Christians should do the same. He said conversations about punishment for heretics are for the next generation. Right now, the goal is to build influence.
This is not fringe. These men have podcasts, churches, conferences. Joe Webbon is the guy that has a beard, looks like Mike, what's his name from the Daily Wire?
Oh, Matt Walsh.
He looks like Matt Walsh, remember? They're training a generation of young men to see Christian nationalism not as extremism, but as faithfulness.
Yeah, right. So how did this idea move from the margins to the mainstream? Well, how did a movement rooted in segregation, animated by theocratic theology, and led by pastors who openly reject religious pluralism, gain political power in the United States?
The answer is infrastructure. The Christian right built a parallel universe, a network of institutions designed to shape belief, culture, and policy outside the mainstream. Michelle Goldberg, in her book Kingdom Coming, and in talks she's given over the years, describes this as a Truman Show strategy. Create an alternative reality so complete that people inside it never have to encounter dissenting information.
Start with education, homeschooling networks, Christian private schools, and universities like Liberty, Bob Jones, Pensacola Christian College. These institutions teach revisionist history, young earth creationism, and biblical literalism. They produce graduates who believe America was founded as a Christian nation, that secular humanism is a religion, and that they are persecuted minorities. Oh, yeah.
Then add media, Christian radio, television, and now podcasts like this, but not here. Networks like Trinity Broadcasting Network, Salem Radio, and independent YouTube channels reach millions. These outlets do not present news. They present narrative. They tell viewers that they are under siege, that secular elites hate them, that their country is being stolen.
Oh, yes, stolen. Vignette number 4 is next.
In the 1800s, a phrase takes hold that does more than describe expansion. It sanctifies it. Manifest destiny. The idea is that American growth across the continent isn't just likely or strategic, but inevitable, even ordained. A nation becomes a mission, and missions don't simply move, they justify. The language of providence turns policy into prophecy. It's not only that people want land, it's that they claim God wants them to have it. And once you attach divine approval to national ambition, the moral math changes. Conquest becomes purpose. Displacement becomes progress. Resistance becomes wickedness. This is how national myths operate. They simplify complexity, they sanctify power, and they erase victims, often without needing to say their names. And the logic doesn't stay in the 1800s. It echoes forward anytime the country is framed as chosen, exceptional, and therefore righteous by default. Christian nationalism doesn't require everyone to be devout. It requires a nation to treat its identity as sacred, and then to treat its dominance as justified. That's the danger of a wholly national story. It can make the expansion of power feel like virtue, and it can make accountability feel like betrayal. Because once the nation is the mission, anything that slows the mission starts to look like the enemy.
At legal advocacy, organizations like the Alliance Defending Freedom, Liberty Council, and the American Center of Law and Justice file lawsuits designed to chip away at church-state separation. They represent Christian business owners who refuse services to LGBTQ customers, schools that want to post the 10 Commandments, and crisis pregnancy centers that masquerade as medical clinics.
Catherine Stewart, author of The Power Worshippers, documents how these organizations are funded. She actually followed the money. Much of it comes from a small number of extremely wealthy donors who view Christian nationalism not as theology, but as a vehicle for economic policy. They want low taxes, deregulation, the dismantling of the Department of Education, dismantling of the social safety net, and the rollback of environmental protections. Christian nationalism gives them a populist base.
Ralph Drollinger runs an organization called Capital Ministries. He holds weekly Bible studies in Congress and in state legislatures across the country. 12 of 15 Trump cabinet members attend his studies. Drollinger teaches that social welfare programs have no scriptural basis. He teaches that servants should submit to masters, applying the biblical master-slave relationship to modern workers and employers. He teaches that progressive taxations, capital gain taxes, and minimum wage laws violate biblical principles.
David Barton, a Christian nationalist historian who has been repeatedly debunked by actual historians, makes the same arguments. He claims the Bible opposes Social Security, Medicare, food stamps, and public education.
Wow.
He says the founders intended a Christian nation and that the separation of church and state is a myth. His books have been pulled from Christian publishers for factual errors, but he remains hugely influential in homeschool curricula and Republican politics.
It's a mind virus. Then there is Project Blitz. In 2018, the Congressional Prayer Caucus Foundation, a Christian nationalist lobbying group, released a playbook for state legislators. The playbook was titled Project Blitz, a toolkit for state legislators, actually. It contained model bills designed to promote Christian nationalism at the state level. The strategy was to flood state legislatures with so many bills that opposition could not keep up, flooding the zone. That's what they're doing now, too. I mean, that's their MO.
That's the game.
Yeah, that's their game.
There's so much junk out there that people get so desensitized and they're like, what the heck is happening?
Yeah.
The bills were organized in tiers. Tier 1 bills were symbolic, designed to normalize Christian language in government. These included resolutions like declaring a year of the Bible, bills requiring "In God We Trust" plaques in schools, proclamation celebration of Christian heritage. Tier 2 bills were more aggressive. These included measures allowing religious exemptions for anti-discrimination laws. Tier 3 bills were the endgame, bills defining life as beginning at conceptions, bills restricting LGBT and trans rights specifically, bills funneling public money to religious schools.
Amanda Tyler of the Baptist Joint Committee for Religious Liberty has tracked Project Blitz legislation in all 50 states. She has testified before Congress about it. She calls it a coordinated assault on church-state separation, and she notes that the bills are written in identical language, copy-paste from the Project Blitz playbook.
Then there is the organizational infrastructure. The Family Research Council runs a program called Watchmen on the Wall, a network of 27,000 pastors trained in political organizing. Mike Pence, former vice president, was a keynote speaker at their conferences. They distribute guides on how to mobilize congregations for voter registration and turnout while avoiding U.S. IRS restrictions on political activity by churches.
Rob Schneck, a former leader of Operation Rescue, who has since renounced the movement, describes a fundraising strategy. He says Christian right organization makes people mad as hell and frightened to go to sleep, then ask for money. The message is always the same. You're under attack, your children are in danger, your country is being stolen, send us money to fight back.
And it works. The Christian right has become one of the most powerful political forces in America, despite representing a minority of the population. Andrew Whitehead, a sociologist who co-authored the book Taking America Back for God, has measured this. Using survey data, he and his co-author Samuel Perry created a Christian nationalism scale based on 5 statements. Do you believe the federal government should declare the U.S. a Christian nation? Do you believe the federal government should advocate Christian values? Do you believe the success of the U.S. is part of God's plan? And so on.
Whitehead's found that about 10% of Americans are what he calls ambassadors, full adherents of Christian nationalism. Another 20% are sympathizers, that is 30% total. But there is what matters. That 30% votes as a bloc, donates as a bloc, and organizes as a bloc. They dominate Republican primaries, they shape policy in state legislations, and they have structural advantages, gerrymandering the Electoral College, the Senate that allows them to wield disproportionate power,
disproportionate.
Disproportionate, yeah, that one.
Michelle Goldberg noted this as early as 2006. She said Christian nationalism is a minority movement imposing its will on a pluralistic society. And she warned that it was becoming more dangerous in 2006 and desperate. When she first wrote about it during the Bush administration, the movement was optimistic. They believed they were winning. By the Obama administration, that optimism had curdled into paranoia. They believed they were losing, and that made them willing to embrace more extreme measures.
That's what they're doing. Matthew Taylor describes this as a shift from triumphalism to siege mentality. In the 20,000 or 2000s, Christian nationalists believed they were building the kingdom of God in America. By the 2010s, they believed they were defending a remnant against apocalyptic secularism. And when people believe they are in an existential fight, they stop caring about norms, rules, or democratic processes. They believe the stakes justify any tactics, and that's what they're doing now.
Which brings us to Mr. Orange himself, the president of the United States, Donald Trump. Trump is not religious. He does not go to church. He cannot even name a favorite Bible verse. He's been married 3 times, bragged about sexual assault, paid hush money to a porn star, whatever else he's done in the Epstein files, and mocked a disabled reporter. By every measure of traditional Christian morality, he should be anathema to evangelicals.
But they look at David and a lot of the biblical characters, and he's in good company. And yet 81% of white evangelical voted for him in 2016, 84% in 2020, and white evangelical remain his most loyal base. How? The
answer is Christian nationalism. Trump did not win evangelicals despite his immorality. He won them because of a very specific theological framework that sees him as a divine instrument. This framework is rooted in a prophecy about an ancient Israelite king named Jehu.
In 2 Kings chapter 9, the prophet Elijah anoints Jehu king of Israel and commands him to destroy the house of Ahab, a corrupt and idolatrous ruling family. Jehu is not a righteous man. He is violent, ruthless, and driven by ambition. But he is God's chosen instrument to overthrow a wicked regime. After he seizes power, Jehu massacres Ahab's descendants, kills the priest of Baal, and establishes a new order.
Matthew Taylor, in his book, The Violent Take It by Force, documents how this story became a prophecy about Trump. Christian nationalist leaders began calling Trump a Jehu figure as early as 2015. They said God does not always choose holy men. Sometimes he chooses a hammer. Trump was their hammer.
Oh, God. Yeah.
There's a modern framework you'll hear in Christian nationalist circles that sounds almost like a strategy memo. The idea of the 7 mountains. The claim is that society is built on key institutions: education, government, media, business, entertainment, family, and religion, and that whoever controls those mountains controls the nation. This isn't simply about living your faith in public. It's about capturing systems. It treats culture as territory. It reframes politics as spiritual warfare. And once you accept that framing, ordinary democratic disagreement starts to look like evil, not difference. Opponents become enemies. Compromise becomes surrender. That's why this matters, because a movement that believes it has God's mandate doesn't just want a voice in the public square. It wants the public square to belong to it. And when political power is pursued with religious certainty, the moral brakes come off. The question stops being, what serves everyone, and becomes, what advances the mission? The 7 mountains idea makes the goal explicit, not persuasion, but replacement, one institution at a time, until the state mirrors a religious vision. That's the strategy. And once you see it as strategy, you can recognize it in the real world, where the fight is often local, procedural, and quiet, until it isn't.
Lance Wallnew, the 7 Mountains teacher, was one of the first to apply this framework. He called Trump a wrecking ball to the spirit of political correctness. Paula White, Trump's spiritual advisor, I remember her, the one that was,
Mandela
the Mandela Honda, said God had anointed him. Jerry Falwell Jr., who ran Liberty University, endorsed Trump in 2016, saying, "We're not electing pastor in chief. The message was clear. Personal morality does not matter if the leader is advancing God's purposes or whether they're a pedo."
And Mr.
Mm.
Falwell Jr. is kind of like, I don't know, disappeared after the pool boy incident.
Oh, yes.
This theology subordinates truth to power. Matthew Taylor defines authoritarianism in one sentence: truth subordinated to power. And that is exactly what happened. Christian nationalists stopped caring whether Trump told the truth. They stopped caring whether he followed the law. They stopped caring whether he's in the Epstein files. They cared only that he appointed conservative judges, banned Muslims, attacked the media, deported immigrants, and made their enemies suffer.
Tim Whitaker, who runs the New Evangelical podcast, calls this the cruelty thesis. He argues that Christian nationalists worship a cruel God, and therefore they want a cruel leader. They don't see Trump cruelty as a flaw, they see it as a strength. And they believe that cruelty towards the right target, immigrants, LGBTQ people, secularists, is righteous.
This is why Trump's photo op in June of 2020 resonated so powerfully. After federal officers used tear gas and rubber bullets prior to the whole thing with ICE in Minnesota, they were doing the tear gas to clear peaceful protesters again from Lafayette Square. Trump walked to St. John's Episcopal Church and held up a Bible upside down.
Upside down.
He did not read from it. He did not pray. He simply held it up for the cameras.
Look, I'm holding a Bible. Catherine Stewart analyzed the moment. She said it sent two messages. First, the Bible is above the law. Second, Christian identity comes before the Constitution. Trump was signaling to his base that he was their champion and that he would use violence to defend Christian dominance. And he has.
And on January 6, 2021, that promise was fulfilled. The insurrectionists carried Christian nationalist symbols. They prayed. They sang hymns. They erected a cross on the Capitol lawn, right next to the hanging gallows.
Yeah.
They believed they were taking back the country for God.
Yeah, and the kind of God they're taking the country back to. The Baptist Joint Committee for Religious Liberty submitted a report to the January 6th committee documenting the role of Christian nationalism in the attack. Amanda Tyler testified that Christian nationalist rhetoric was not incidental. It was central. Leaders like Walnu, White, and others had spent months telling their followers that the election was stolen, that Trump was anointed by God, and that it was their duty to fight.
Samuel Perry, the sociologist, has documented the radicalization of white evangelicals. He and his co-author, Andrew Whitehead, conducted surveys showing that white Christian nationalism is the single strongest predictor of believing the 2020 election was stolen. Not partisanship, not media consumption, Christian nationalism.
Brad Onishi, who wrote the book Preparing for War, The Extremist History of White Christian Nationalism, grew up in evangelical churches in Orange County, California. He became a pastor at 20. He left the movement after realizing it had fused Christianity with American nationalism to the point where they were inseparable. He says Christian nationalism is not primarily about belief, it is about identity. It is a story to inhabit. And for many white Americans, especially men, it offers belonging, purpose, and power because they feel that their numbers are diminishing and they're feeling less than. So, yeah.
Onishi also notes that the media ecosystem has replaced theology. He says that for many evangelicals, podcasts, YouTube, and Fox News, and I guess now CBS, now reshape religious understanding more than pastors or even scripture. This creates a religion that is infinitely adaptable to political needs. If Trump does something immoral, the influencers reframe it. If reality contradicts the narrative, the influencers, well, and Katie or whatever her name is, and what's her name? Caroline, deny reality.
Yeah, Ron Suskind, a journalist, wrote about this in 2004. He interviewed a senior Bush administration official who told him, "We're an empire now, and when we act, we create our own reality." The official mocked what he called the reality-based community, People who believe solutions emerge from judicious study of discernible reality. The official said that was no longer how the world works.
That's a big admission.
Yeah.
Michelle Goldberg connects this to Hannah Arendt's analysis of totalitarianism. Arendt wrote that totalitarian movements create parallel institutions so complete that followers live in a separate Truman Show reality. Goldberg argues Christian nationalism has done this. They have their own schools, their own media, legal system, healthcare networks, even their own science. The Creation Museum in Kentucky teaches that dinosaurs lived alongside humans 6,000 years ago. Crisis pregnancy centers masquerade as medical clinics. Ex-gay conversion therapy programs claim to cure homosexuality.
They live in their alternative universe. And when you live in this ecosystem, when every source of information you trust tells you the same story, it is nearly impossible to escape. Christine Saluk describes this. She was homeschooled with a Becca curriculum, isolated from non-Christian friends, bombarded with Fox News all day. She was taught that scientists were lying, that secularists wanted to destroy her family, that anyone who left the faith was deceived by Satan. She says it is a cult.
Saluk also describes the Quiverful movement, a subset of Christian nationalism that I guess the Duggar family was a part of that, and we know what happened to that.
Yeah.
Teaches families to have as many children as possible. The metaphor comes from Psalm 127. Like arrows in the hands of a warrior are children born in one's youth. Blessed is the man whose quiver is full of them. The goal is demographic. Have more children than secular families. Raise them in ideological purity. Eventually outnumber and outlast the opposition.
Vignette number 6.
Movements don't win by speeches alone. They win by infrastructure, by pipelines that turn ideas into policies and policies into law. Think tanks, training networks, media ecosystems, donor streams, legal strategies, model legislation. Quiet systems that move in the background while everyone watches the headlines. And once you understand the pipeline, you start to recognize the pattern. The same language appearing in different places, the same arguments resurfacing in different states, the same fights showing up at local meetings where only a handful of people are watching. Christian nationalism often focuses on the levers most citizens ignore: school boards, judicial races, county commissions, low turnout primaries, because that's where change can happen fast, with little resistance. It's not always loud. It's procedural. It's incremental. One rule change, one curriculum shift, one court precedent, one local seat. And if you can shape what children learn, who gets protected and who gets excluded, you don't need to persuade the whole country. You just need to control the mechanism. That's the strategy. Not conversion, but capture. Not debate, but replacement. And the reason this matters is simple. In a democracy, the rules belong to all of us. When a movement builds a pipeline to govern on behalf of only one religious vision, the nation doesn't become more moral, it becomes less free.
Exactly. Doug Wilson has endorsed this logic. In his interview with Sam Harris, Wilson said he, as a post-millennialist, he believes Christians will eventually disciple the nations and establish a 1,000-year reign before Christ returns, God forbid. He said this will take centuries, but he is patient and he is raising children to carry on the work. It's crazy.
This is the long game. Christian nationalists do not need to win majorities. They need to control key institutions, the courts, state legislatures, school boards, and they need to be willing to wait. Joel Webben, the pastor featured in the Tobiah Powell documentary, said explicitly that Christians should model themselves on the LGBT movement. Small minority, captured institutions, change laws, and transform culture. Webben said Christians have the same goal: take the mountains, one institution at a time.
So what do they want? What is the end game of Christian nationalism?
Well, we do not have to guess. They are telling us. In the Powell documentary, Dale Partridge said there should be no freedom of religion. He said mosques should be illegal. He said denominational freedom is acceptable, but freedom to worship other gods is not. Joel Webben said Christians need the will to power Andrew Isker said the Great Commission is a mandate to Christianize nations.
Doug Wilson, in his interview with Sam Harris, said he opposes a hard establishment and official state church. But he insists that morality cannot be separate from the state and that morality requires a religious foundation. He said secularism is a failed project. When pressed, he admitted that in his ideal future, religious tests for office would be acceptable.
Catherine Stewart, in her research for the Power Worshippers, identified the policy goals: abortion bans with no exceptions, restrictions on contraception, rollback of LGBT rights, including marriage, adoption, and employment protections, defunding or eliminating public education in favor of vouchers for religious schools, dismantling environmental regulations, eliminating the social safety net, tax cuts for the wealthy, and ultimately a constitutional amendment declaring the United States a Christian nation.
Amanda Tyler, in her book, How to End Christian Nationalism, lists the practical consequences. Religious minorities marginalized, non-believers treated as second-class citizens, science education gutted, healthcare access restricted, gun violence normalized as a God-given right, and a government that uses religious language to justify cruelty and exclusion.
David Goldenberg of the Anti-Defamation League has tracked the rise of anti-Semitism within Christian nationalism. He notes that anti-Semitic incidents in the United States are at their highest level since 1979. Public attitudes expressing anti-Semitic beliefs have doubled in recent years, from 11% to 20%, and much of this is driven by Christian nationalist rhetoric about globalists, elites, and a hidden enemy controlling America.
Nick Fuentes, a white nationalist and Christian nationalist influencer, openly espouses anti-Semitism. He has said, we need to restore a Christian culture in America. Andrew Torba, founder of the social media platform Gab, has built a space explicitly for Christian nationalists. Both men have meetings with Republican officials. Both have millions of followers.
William Cavanaugh, a theologian who spoke on a panel at the University of St. Thomas, calls nationalism a religion. He cites Carlton Hayes, a historian who in 1960 wrote that nationalism had become a functional religion, complete with rituals, symbols, and demands for sacrifice. Kavanaugh argues that Christian nationalism is idolatry. It places the nation in the place of God, and it sanctifies violence in the nation's name.
Matthew Taylor says we are facing the most potent threat of American democracy in the nation's history. He says Christian nationalism has polluted the information ecosystem to the point where 1/3 of Americans believe that the 2020 election was stolen. 2/3 of white evangelical believe it. And when people believe a lie that foundational, they're capable of anything.
Taylor calls this illiberal democracy. The goal is not to abolish elections. The goal is to rig the system so thoroughly through gerrymandering, voter suppression, court packing, and disinformation that elections no longer threaten power. You keep the trappings of democracy while hollowing out its existence.
Steve Bannon, Trump's former strategist, articulated the strategy. He called it flood the zone with shit. Produce so much disinformation, so many competing narratives that people give up trying to discern truth. When truth is unknowable, power is all that matters. And we're at this point right now.
And when power is all that matters, violence becomes inevitable. Christian nationalists have already shown they're willing to use violence. January 6th was not an anomaly. It was a preview. Pastor Cody Dees, who left the movement and now leads a church resisting Christian nationalism, says many of his former congregants talk openly about martyrdom and about the Second Amendment as a divine right. He says that they are willing to die and willing to kill for what they believe is a holy cause.
Augustus Corbett, an attorney who has studied white Christian nationalism history, traces this willingness to the very beginning. He says the doctrine of discovery, the papal bulls, the Puritan vision, all of it was built on violence. Always has been. Conquest, enslavement, extermination. Christian nationalism has always been willing to destroy in order to save. That's their MO.
Yeah.
And here's vignette number 7.
When a nation fuses one religious identity with citizenship, someone always pays the price. Pluralism becomes suspect, minority faiths become conditional, and rights, rights that are supposed to belong to everyone, start to feel negotiable. Because the goal isn't equal freedom, it's moral dominance. And moral dominance always creates an in-group and an out-group. It tells some people they are the real nation, and it tells others they are guests who should be grateful to be tolerated. That's why Christian nationalism is not just a religious conversation, it's a civic one. If your neighbor's freedom depends on sharing your theology, then freedom isn't freedom anymore. It's permission, and permission can be revoked. A multi-faith democracy only works when the state belongs to all of us, when laws protect everyone, including people we disagree with, including people we don't understand, including people we will never be. The moment the nation is treated like a church with borders, citizenship becomes a test of purity, not a promise of rights. And when that happens, the cost isn't abstract. The cost is real people, real families, real futures, living under a system that decides, quietly and officially, who counts. Freedom can't be conditional. If it isn't freedom.
And yet there is resistance. Amanda Tyler's Christians Against Christian Nationalism campaign has gathered tens of thousands of signatures from Christians who reject this ideology. Bishop Curry, Reverend Wallace, Russell Moore, and many others have spoken out from within the faith. Scholars like Whitehead, Perry, Taylor, Onishi, Stewart, and Goldberg have documented the threat. Former insiders like Shank and Onishi have warned the public.
The question is whether it is enough. Christian nationalism is declining as a percentage of the population, but it's becoming more central to the Republican politics. It is more organized, better funded, and more willing to abandon democratic norms than ever before. And it has captured the Supreme Court, state legislatures, and a major political party.
Rob Reiner, the late Rob Reiner, who produced the documentary God and Country, said that 20 to 30% of the population is wielding disproportionate power. He pointed to gerrymandering, voter suppression, the Electoral College, and the Senate as structural advantages that allow a minority to rule. Michelle Goldberg made the same point. She said Christian nationalism is a form of minority control, and that it threatens not just pluralism, but democracy itself.
David Morrison, a Princeton theologian, asked whether liberal democracy has the moral strength to resist. He called it the thinness of liberal morality. Can a system built on neutrality and proceduralism defend itself against a movement that demands total commitment and is willing to use violence? Morrison did not answer, but he said it is the question of our time.
What we know is this: Christian nationalism is not new. It's not fringe, and it's not going away. It has deep roots in American history, in the doctrine of discovery, in Puritan theocracy, in slaveholder theology, in segregationist politics. It's been cultivated by theologians like Rushdoony and Schaeffer. It's been weaponized by political operatives like Wyrick and Falwell. And it has found its champion in Donald Trump.
Its adherents believe they are on a mission from God. They believe America is a new Israel, that Christians are a chosen people, and that secular pluralism is a satanic threat. They have built institutions to train their children, media to control their information, and legal strategists to reshape the courts. They have a plan, and they are executing it. So how can God have Israel be the chosen people, the Jews, and then the Christians?
Yeah.
Or is it Zionists that are both Jews and Christians that are the chosen people? I don't know.
The end game is not subtle. It is a Christian nation, legally and culturally. It is religious tests for office. It is laws based on their interpretation of Scripture. It is marginalized minorities. It is dismantled safety nets. It is environmental destruction justified as dominion. It is violence sanctified as holy.
And it's happening now. Not in some dystopian future. Now. In state legislatures, in school board meetings, in crisis pregnancy centers, in churches, in families. Every time someone says America is a Christian nation, every time someone claims persecution for being asked to follow neutral laws, every time someone says their faith requires them to control others, that is Christian nationalism.
And that is not a call to panic. It is a call to clarity, to see what is happening, to name it, and to resist it. Not with matching cruelty, but not with abandoning democratic norms, but with the patient work of education, organizing, and defending pluralism.
Because the alternative is not just the loss of religious freedom for non-Christians, it is the loss of freedom for everyone. Christian nationalism does not stop at the borders of faith. It demands submission in every sphere: family, education, work, law, culture. Once it has power, it does not share it.
Amanda Tyler says faith is only authentic if it is freely chosen. That is the Baptist principle that drove the founders to separate church and state, not to attack religion, but to protect it from the corrupting influence of power. And that is the principle that is now under assault.
Christian nationalism is a threat to democracy. It is a threat to pluralism, and it's a threat to Christianity itself, because a faith that seeks to coerce its faith is a faith that has lost its way.
And that is the choice before us: a nation where one faith rules, or a nation where all are free to believe or not to believe as their conscience dictates. A nation defined by exclusion, or a nation defined by inclusion. A nation of the past, or a nation of the future.
Well, guys, thank you for joining us for this special edition of Transition Radio. We hope this deep dive into the roots and reality of Christian nationalism has given you much more to think about.
Yeah, we do need to stay informed, and we need to stay engaged, and stay tuned.
Yeah.
Because we have another show in a couple days.
Yeah, we do. And guys, you know, I don't have the answer. We don't have the answers, but we definitely can't continue with these individuals that believe that they are better than everyone, that they hold the answers. And what they've done is they've destroyed the world. They're destroying it every single day. And they've been doing it since the colonialist times, the colonizers, you know, what they've done to all the natives of this world, like the song Corazón del Mundo, Hearts of This World. If we would have been living the way the indigenous were living, we would be living in a better world right now.
We truly would. I mean, we've lost so much.
Yeah.
People don't even realize it. You know, we've done shows on the old world and how technology used to serve the people and help, you know, the person without having to pay for it, you know, and we had a better world at one point, and somehow we sold our birthright to this capitalist demagogue system that we're under right now.
This horrible demiurge that wants to see us all destroyed, basically. And he's doing a great job of it, because we're actually getting there. But let's hope that people wake up, that they remember, because it's about remembering who you are. You don't need to worship or kneel to any God. The true creator, the monad of this universe, doesn't require our worship. The demiurge is an insecure little tyrant, little narcissistic, childlike entity. And we're seeing the exact mirror of that entity in the president of this country.
Absolutely.
And it needs to stop, because enough harm has already been caused. And
well, you've been informed.
Yeah.
You've been given the keys. You've been given the instructions. You've been given the history, the foundational basis. We invite any debate, any discussion about it that you may have. If you wanted to contact us to do a debate about it, or if you wanted to contact us about if you have any questions about it, we would more than be happy to entertain any of it and reply to any of your comments on YouTube with our responses and stuff. So we wanted to thank you guys for joining us tonight, and look forward to the next show.
Yeah. And again, the email is right here on the screen, transitionradioshow@gmail.com. We welcome any debate, any discussion, as long as we keep it civil. But hopefully, like you said, you've been informed, and hopefully you can put two and two together and realize what this virus that has taken over the world for a long, long time now has done and continues to do so.
Yeah, I had other segments of the show that would talk about the international implications of it all, but I think we've said our piece.
Yeah.
We wanted to kind of shorten our shows for the sake of our own sanity and rest and restoration. So we wanted to, keep it
at an hour and a half. Yeah, so we managed to do that today, which is great. Love you guys. Catch you Thursday. We will see you real soon. Be well and stay safe. We love you, but remember to always love yourselves too. Good night.
Another journey is in, but the path is ever bright. Transition radio's call, guiding us through the night. For more stories untold. Transition Radio.